Hello. Thank you for listening to Three Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Three Legacies Recovery Recordings Podcast. I'm your host, Paul. Today is Tuesday, October 7th, 2025, and this is episode 74. I want to thank all the listeners, everybody that's reached out. You can reach us at Recovery Recordings 615. That's plural, Recovery Recordings 615 at yahoo.com. You can also reach us on Facebook. We have a private Facebook page. We're on all kinds of different major platforms, streaming platforms, Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio, a lot of different ones. Podomatic is one of them. And let's see, we got a lot of cool stuff coming up. This upcoming Sunday, which is October 12th, we have Jerry P. and Stephen T. We're going to be going over, we started a Traditions AA Traditions series, and we're doing Tradition 3 this Sunday. Then the following Sunday is October 19th. Scott L. and John E. are both going to be doing an episode. We're going to do one on steps 6 and 7, and we're calling it Taking a Certain Attitude Towards the Power. Can't wait for that. That's going to be exciting. You can also, let's see, what else? We have the following week, Wednesday, October 22nd, is going to be Ralph W. from Los Angeles. We're calling that episode Emotional Displacements and Rearrangements. Super stoked about that. And let's see, we've been planning this tonight's podcast episode for several months now. Both of these guys on the show tonight are both real good buddies of mine. And let's see. Super excited about it. So we'll start off with Tom. Tom Yu from Santa Fe, New Mexico. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Paul. Really good.
Good, man.
Thanks
Can you hear
for
me? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So Tom, and then we also got Justin H. from Chattanooga, Tennessee. How's it going, Justin?
Oh, it's going great, man. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Great, man. So for the listeners, me, Tom, and Justin have periodically, we started a little group chat thing going a couple years back, and we've just kind of we stayed in touch over the years. Justin is, me and Justin got sober together, pretty much. I was probably a year sober when Justin moved into the recovery house that I was living at the time, and we've just stayed close over the years. And then he's just moved back to Chattanooga, which is both of our hometowns. And then Tom has been somebody along the way that we just kind of looked up to over the years, and just happened to be come into our lives in real important times of our lives. So super excited about this. And Tom, how's things going in Santa Fe?
Things are going great. We're coming up. We're having a workshop. My home group is 25 years old that I helped found, an AA group. And we're having, usually in October, that's when it was October 7th of 2000 that we started the group. But we usually in October have a workshop to celebrate the anniversary. And we've done, I think, 22 of them.
Wow.
Over the 25 years. And this year we're having we think it's a really exciting one. And I'm on the committee for it. And actually the moderators, the people who are leading it, are just staying at my house, and so it's going to be a big deal. It's Matthew M. from California is the AA, and Larcene G. is the Al-Anon, also from Hawthorne, California. She is, and so it's going to be one of the biggest ones we've ever done.
Wow,
and we're real excited. So there's a lot going on,
Nice.
The town I live in is not a hotbed of big book step work. It never has been.
Yeah.
And but there's a pocket of enthusiasm, and we are enthusiastic, and we do the deal.
Nice.
And we get desperate types, and they do the deal, and they get better. So
Very cool.
that's the point of the whole thing.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of good things about, what was his name? Matthew M. Is that what?
Matthew M.
I've heard a lot of great things about him, but I haven't met him or talked to him yet. So,
yeah, you ought to have him on one of these.
Yeah. I've considered. I'm going to reach out to him.
He's known for he and Bill C., who is his sponsor, and JS, who's his sponsor, used to do a thing called Kitchen Table AA.
Nice.
And it was like basically, one alcoholic talking to another at the kitchen table kind of thing. And they did that all over. It was really good. I imagine we'll hear some of that this weekend. So
very cool. Nice. And Justin, you got a workshop coming up this weekend too, huh? That you've helped arrange. You want to talk a little bit about that? The workshop in Chattanooga.
Yeah, man, I'm pretty excited about it because the workshop, I was asked, because I'm on the National Corrections Conference Committee,
Nice.
and I was asked for some help, and then I had this idea, and, of course, we all, know and love, John and Renee, and so, it popped in my mind, and I was just like, this is what we got to do. We got to put this on, and it's just, so we're going to have a Three Legacies workshop here in Chattanooga, and they're going to come down, and I mean, I'm really hopeful for this, and I think that we're going to have a fantastic event.
Nice. Yeah, super excited.
When is that?
Go ahead, Justin.
This Saturday. It'll be from 8:45 to 11:30.
Yeah.
Okay. You're doing your deal, and I'm doing my deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to be down there in Chattanooga recording it this weekend, so I'll plan on, if everything goes well, I'll plan on posting it on the Three Legacies YouTube page. So for the listeners, if you're interested in that, it's John E., which y'all have heard on the show before, and also Renee E., and both of them are going to be doing that, and so it's going to be cool. It's going to be exciting. Yeah, guys, when we were talking about, a good topic for the listeners, what we're calling this is Entered the World of the Spirit. It's going to be on steps 10 and 11. And, I don't really know that a person can go wrong talking about 10 and 11, right? I mean, I guess you probably could, don't get me wrong. But 10 and 11 are, it's pretty much my favorite, some of my favorite two steps, especially when you put both of them together. And, let's talk a little bit about, Entered the World of the Spirit, the title of this, right? Tom, what comes to mind when you think of, by this time, we've gotten through this body of work where it's implying that we've went through the first 9 steps, right? And now we're entering the world of the Spirit. What really comes to mind with you whenever you think of that?
The first thing that comes to mind is amends, is the 9th step. That's what comes to mind. I had, before, I don't know how to do this in a congenial way, but the 9th step was not a popular step in my town back. I've been sober 39 years.
Nice.
So I started making amends. I mean, formally, the way it's outlined in the big book, at about 7 years sober. And it was because I was influenced by people from other places, Joe Hawk and Mark Houston, people like that. And but before that, even before that, I got through some really, really tough times, And in the beginning, I prayed to God to keep me sober, and that's all I had was a sober God. I was going to run the rest of my life. And I think really you need to do that in order to, see that doesn't work. To have the experience that running your life doesn't work if you're a real alcoholic, and it's deep down in you. And but I got through some real hard times in the first 6 years, and nearly drank several times, was suicidal in the beginning, and something carried me through that. And so those experiences, I sound like a broken record. Page 46 said that none of us could define or comprehend that power which is God. And so what that means is I can't give it a name. I give it all sorts of names, but they change all the time, right? But I can't give you the name of God that is the perfect name, right? Because I don't know what that is. I mean, there's the old Hebrew thing of if you knew the name of God and uttered it, it would kill you. There's the Hindu thing of the 108 names of God. So what our book says is that we can't define it. We can't give it a name that's going to be sufficient, and we can't comprehend it. Meaning, I don't understand God. So this whole thing of the God as you understand Him, to me, doesn't make any sense, because if I could understand God, I'd be, beyond human. That's all there is to it. And so I can't understand it. So what does that leave me with? That leaves me with experience after experience after experience, boots on the ground experience with the power that I can tell you about all day long. Amen. I can't tell you what God is, and I don't understand God, but I can tell you my personal experience with the power. And so, that's where we get started. So when I really, the most supernatural stuff that happened to me was when I made my ninth step amends. See, I was 38 years old when I got sober, and I'd created a lot of havoc. I'd hurt a lot of people. I'd owed a lot of money, and I'd broken hearts, and the whole thing that the book says. And plus, I was a traveler. I'd gone all over America. So I wanted the things that Joe and Mark were talking about, which were, Mark Houston used to say, how free do you want to get? And I thought, man, it's been a long haul up to this point. I think I want all of it. I think I want to get as free as I can possibly get. And so I started making amends to old girlfriends, to people I owed money to everyone in my family, really hard amends, like ones that were humiliating. They just were, and I prayed my ass off, and I was able to accomplish that, right? Like I went into a store that I had stolen from for years, and I was sure I was going to go to jail. I was sure they were at least going to call the cops on me. And I went in and I made my amends, and they said, "Oh, yeah, you're one of those, just pay us what you owe us." And when I walked out of that place, it was an Albertsons grocery store, which y'all don't have Albertsons. I don't think we have them in the West. And I walked out of there, and there was tears coming down my face, and I felt like I was sliding across the pavement, man. Wow. My feet didn't even touch the ground. And I thought, nothing but a power greater than myself could have accomplished this, because I couldn't even go in. I prayed and prayed and prayed to be able to walk into the store and talk to them. And that was one out of at least 100 amends that I made that were tough. And so when I did that, it cemented this idea that there was something that cared about me. There was a spirit or a guardian angel or, God Almighty, or call it whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter, that really cared
This
about
call will be recorded.
that really cared about me and always had, you know what I mean? Yeah. And like a benevolent force that was trying to help me. And I had concrete proof of that, right? Yeah. Of the experience of it. So at that point, I knew that I was living in the spirit. If I wanted to, like I can go on a self-will jag or go with the ego, and I can kind of fall out of that consciousness. But basically, it's there, regardless of what I do, trying to help me. So I had entered the world of the spirit, and I was conscious of it, based on that. And I think that's what comes right up to the 10th step anyway.
Nice. Very cool. I love that you said that you was at 7 years sober whenever you started making the amends stuff, because I was later on in the year, I was probably maybe 5 or 6 years sober before I started making amends. And it wasn't until it was right around the time me and you met, actually. And so Justin, how about you, buddy? What comes to mind when you think of entering the world of the spirit?
I agree with Tom, and I don't think it's about trying to fully comprehend or define, I immediately thought of, like on page 63 at the very top, right before the promises, but it says, when we sincerely, and it's talking about taking this position with God. And so you read, from 62 at the bottom of the paragraph, and here we are at the top of 63. And this sincerity, though, is something that I miss. And, so I'm a kind of type of person now that I like to, I believe in, annual house cleanings, going through the steps, at least every year. That's just something that in my walk, that's what I like to do. And it took years, even like sponsoring people, book studies, reading the book, and I missed that. I missed it for a long time. And, and it's like, a couple other things to bring up is that we do get little snippets, of like coming to believe, in Bill's story with, Ebby introducing him to the profound idea of his conception.
Yeah.
And then from the conversation with Carl Jung and Roland Hazard. And so, and just so on, you flip back and forth from, this part of the book, and then you get referred to the, spiritual appendix in the back. And so we're looking at like, we're kind of, as we go through these, and leading up to the third step, I mean, we're getting introduced to what we may come to believe in, is that there may be a power greater than ourselves. And if we can, abandon this prejudice, any prejudice, anything that's, in our way, then we can possibly become God conscious. And this God consciousness, I think, is very, in a sense, something that we get opened up to. I mean, what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me, and I think that it can happen to anybody, is when the power of God gets a hold of you, you're gonna run with it. Because in taking the first 9 steps, and especially I was one of those too, I didn't do amends for years. But now with where I'm at, and I feel like I'm current, and I try to stay current through the the disciplines, is that it's a freedom that I never thought I could ever have. But I do see it's just back to, the third step is just that for me, in my experience with, engaging and gaining access to the power, was for me to also kind of build this working relationship, but out of like that sincerity. Like I mean it,
Nice.
because before, I don't think I ever meant it, the first time I took the third step, and I don't think it's all based on merit, but it's just, that's where I became and where I'm at with growth. And I believe that, the Spirit will guide you. You can become in tune with that.
Yeah. Nice. Very cool. I mean, I can relate to so much to everything y'all said. I really love how when the difference between the conceptions of God versus an experience, right? And I think that the beginning stage is definitely conceptions, and I even think that like even today, like not just the beginning stage, but it goes back to like when I think of conceptions of God, right, or conceptions of a power greater than myself, it goes back to what we were talking on the each day is the day where we must carry the vision of God's will in all our activities, right? So just the thought of that has to do with some kind of conceptions, right? What would that look like to me in my daily basis, in my daily living? By this time in the steps, you have like this pretty good understanding on, like, I always tell people, like, maybe I don't know what God's will is for me, but I do a solid 4-step, and I got a pretty good freaking understanding on what I probably shouldn't be doing. You get what I mean? Right? And then I get these ideals that come from that, in this way we shape a sane and sound ideal, right? So those are conceptions, and I think that those are conceptions those are principles that if I start living, my buddy always says, and this was my experience, was, I started getting these conceptions, and when I started practicing certain principles and putting a daily application of the principles of my life, I started getting, slowly started getting some evidence that something was available. Like, wow, something's here, something's happening, And I think the conceptions was definitely like a beginning stage of that. I really like how on the next line over, our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness, right? And excuse me, guys. Katie always talks about, she says, function. What's the function of something? It means it's expected duty, right? Like the function of my phone is to make a phone call, expect it to make a phone call whenever I need to use it, right? And so, think of like our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness, right? And by this part, I don't think it was the first. Maybe I had glimpses of it, like the first couple times that I was working the steps. But it was later on in my sobriety where I realized, like, what does it mean to be understanding and effective? It's like, oh well. Just because someone isn't doing something how I want them to or whatever, can I look at this person and be, is what I'm doing effective? Is, am I understanding? Am I looking at it through like the lens of God? I love how Juanita was on the show not too long ago, and she uses the prayer. She says, she asks God to be her interpreter, right? And I freaking love that, right? And for me, that's what really comes to mind when I think of our next function being to grow in understanding and effectiveness, right? And it's for God to be my interpreter, right? Help me see the world, as children of God, And that was one thing that really stood out to me when me and Tom did a fist. I shared a fist step with Tom a few years ago, Tom, and one of the things I walked away from that experience with was a couple things. I remember. I remember you were the first person I'd ever heard talk about being mean-spirited, because there was a lot of stuff that I was currently involved in where I'd had, was pretty mean-spirited about certain things, right? And I walked away from that experience with just a lot of different. Oh yeah, the other one was, and it slipped me for a second, but the other one was, you would ask me, I would share a resentment about someone I was working with or whoever, and at the end of it, you would talk about like, this is a child of God, right? And I wasn't able. Until we went through that process, I wasn't able to look at them like, oh, this is a child of God, right? Which is,
right.
So let's touch on that for a minute on the, our next function, growing understanding and effectiveness. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. Well, I'm still hung back at the third step.
Okay.
We talked about.
Okay.
Just a little bit. I just want to kind of, bring the whole thing into context.
Sure.
We say, that the newcomer has to come to believe that a power greater than themselves can restore them to sanity. And I've always kind of had a problem with that, with thinking about brand new people because of my experience. And I don't think that, when you get to Alcoholics Anonymous, if you're the kind of train wreck dumpster fire that I was, then you have no reason to believe that there was any kind of a benevolent power trying to help you.
Hey, man. Yeah.
Because if there had been, how did my life get in the toilet like this?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I've got a long ways to come to come to believe that there's a power that cares about me. And so in the beginning, I don't think it's come to believe. I think it's hope to believe. You hear, these jackasses like Tom Ewell talk about, God is everything, and only by the grace of a loving God am I sober. And they think, well, that's stupid, but they hear that enough and they think, well, that guy believes that, that he talked himself into that. And that gets their attention. And little by slow, they eventually come to believe, because they hit these walls and they got nothing else but spirit, but the God they can't see, right? That these other people say exists, and so they try that out. They dip their toe in, and then they have an experience, and they go, "Wow, I don't know if God is everything, but I know God got me through that, jackpot I put myself in."
Sure.
So little by slow, you come to that, and then if you have enough of it, and just like Justin said, my first third steps were nothing, man. They were just like, I said them because that's what everybody else was doing. That's what people wanted me to do.
Yeah.
I did it in the treatment center. I didn't mean it for nothing. I wasn't sincere about that. But as I've gone on, through the years, and I have, direct experience with the power, then I know that Fritz told me this years ago. He said, Tom, the third step is that any idea that God will have for your life is going to be better than any idea that you have for your life. and you eventually you get to a point where you believe that, just based on a lot of experience. I mean, this is almost scientific stuff. It's not scientific, but it's basic mathematics.
Yeah.
Like I believe because I've had experience with it, not because somebody told me to believe, and so then, I think all of us, work the steps again and again. We're not like, one off, then live in 10, 11, and 12. I think we're step workers. We do inventory every year, and, we do a third step at least I do third steps all the time.
Yeah.
Because I sponsor all these guys. But now when I do a third step, I can say, and Bob Olson taught us this, take all the pieces of my life, every department, all my children, my grandchildren, my money, my cars, my houses, my health, and then my very life, right? And look at them like poker chips and say, God, I'm all in. I'm all in. You got all, kill me now if you want to, and really mean that,
Yeah.
Richard Rohr in the book, Breathing Underwater in the Third Step, I love what he said. He said, and this relates to what Justin said, if you have a conception of God, right, as like, this terrible swift sword that's going to burn you in hell for the shit you've done in your life, good luck with that third step.
Yeah.
That's going to be a booger.
Yeah.
But if you have a loving God that never judged you, was always trying to help you, and that because love was God's nature. And that's all that God ever was doing, not condemning you, but loving you and trying to lift you up. How could you not take the third step? Is what he says in the book. So anyway,
that's big.
So that's a ways until you get to. I mean, the 10th step for me when I first started was like, I was real mean spirited, I guess you'd say, to a woman at a lumberyard, at a cashier at a lumberyard. And I was 6 months sober or something, right? But it bothered me. It bothered me that I'd treated her like that. And so the next day I went back, and all I knew about the 10th step was like, admit when you're wrong. And so I said, I was in the same line, same cashier. I thought she wouldn't even remember me. I said, yesterday, I was in this line and I was a real asshole. And she looked at me and she goes, yeah, you really were like that. Instead of like, oh, don't worry about it. I'm glad you came back.
Wow.
She didn't let me off the hook, And so that was like a rudimentary 10th step before I really knew instructions with it. I just knew, like, admit what you taught in kindergarten, right? Yeah. Admit when you're wrong, apologize for crap that you do, But through going through the steps again and again, when you get to the 10th step in the big book, the dimension of it completely changes, I think, and the 11th step. And they dovetail anyway. They absolutely slip together.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's enough out of me.
That's good. Yeah. Justin, what comes to mind, dude?
You were talking about the understanding and effectiveness too, and it's just like, I think, where I'm at, like with, step 10 and, putting it to practice, it's just that it's about responsibility. It's just that I've had to grow up in Alcoholics Anonymous. A lot of these principles, have really, made me, the man that I am, and sometimes, I am not those things, I'm not always, just, I guess, a ray of sunshine, but it's just that, but what I think that what it allows me to become, if I do this, is that I can be responsible. And I can, in all of my affairs, all of my relationships, is that could be my function. It's just that, and sometimes it's like, like what Tom had said, it's just that, like, you can understand, where you went wrong, but it's just that, like, there's sometimes if I'm not, taking an account of, like, who I am for that moment or that day is just that, like, I wouldn't even see where I could be effective. Where could I be understanding? You know,
Yeah.
so and I do. I think that that's what it gives us. It gives us a chance that being responsible with our thoughts and our actions and how we relate to other
Mhm.
people.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Yeah. I was talking to a guy earlier, and we were talking about, people in our personal life don't, or whoever, but me and him were talking about he was talking about his mother, and we were talking about how, like, I want it, like, what the steps have really done to me. The more I work on them, and the more I get to this space where it's like, look, man, there's a power that's an all powerful power that's just all loving, right? And what is it that's blocking me from allowing that to flow through me out into God's children? Like, what is
Right.
it? What is it that's standing in the way, blocking that from taking place, right? And
Hmm.
and it gets pretty simple, right? It gets to the point where after you've done enough step work, where you start seeing what the real issue is. It's like, Paul, this isn't your world, this is God's world, right? And we're just here to help. How can we be helpful, right? You get what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
you start getting a really good understanding on what the issue is. It's just like, I'm turning everything into, it's just so me, right?
Hmm.
And that's always gonna, I remember the first time let's go to step 3 real quick. I remember the first time, the first handful of years, I was probably 5-6 years sober whenever I finally had this understanding on, like, holy crap, any life ran on self-will could hardly be a success, right? For the first
Yeah.
5 years, I didn't even know what that even freaking meant, and then, and they even give you the next few pages to talk about this, right? But then it wasn't until I was about 5 or 6 years sober where I really had some, a change of heart through the steps, is really what I like to call it. That was my experience. It's the best words I've found to fit, where I start seeing how, man, people don't have to be lovable for me to love them, right? But
Right.
they don't have to be lovable for me to love them, but on my power, they have to be lovable for me to love them, and
Right.
that's what really stands out when I think of understanding, growing and understanding and effectiveness, having an understanding of what the issue is and then what the solution is. And so, Tom, you want to add anything to any of that?
Well, God, all sorts of stuff came up for me, but to keep going with that understanding and effectiveness, and living a principled life, living with integrity. It was explained to me what integrity was years ago, and integrity, which means wholeness, right? Integrated, like integrity. It means I say what I'm going to do, and I do what I say I'm going to do, right? And I tell you what I'm going to do, and then that's what I do. I do this a lot with explaining to people in AA what a commitment means.
Yeah.
That a commitment means you're going to do it, even if something more fun comes up that you'd rather do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you can't do it because of a family commitment, you'll get somebody else to do it. And it's just, integrity is just that. And it's like Justin said, none of us do it 100% of the time. I screw up all the time. You get me scared enough and I'll start yelling and screaming at somebody,
Sure. Yeah.
and thank God I can make amends later. But the deal with all of this, I think by the time you get to the 10th step, like really get to the 10th step where you're reading this stuff in the big book and it's really coming alive for you. You've done a bunch of step work before that. And you've started to understand that, like, the reason that you're doing all of this is so you can help other alcoholics and you can help God's kids, all of them. I don't know if there'll be time to give you the punchline on this, but I tell people that I know exactly what God's will is, for me and for you,
Yeah.
And it boils down to don't be a dick and help God's kid.
Yeah.
And really, think about it. And and so you start to get, like, when you get into this, you've already been helping people and doing different things. But when you get into this, page 84 and 85 like deeply, then you realize how all of this connects with the idea of being able to help an alcoholic eventually in the 12 step. Because that's, Pritz used to say this. He used to say, if I was a professional football player, I would have to do exercises all week to stay in shape to do my work on Sunday, which was, play ball, right?
Yeah.
He said, so with us, he said, there's a misnomer because a lot of the big book people call going through the steps doing the work. He said, that's not the work. That's the spiritual exercises that we have to do to be in shape to do the work, which is carry a message of hope to the alcoholic.
Yeah.
And that's the gig. And so all the steps are all about that. And you start to get this, And so, and I always go back to Tom Ivester, who I love so much, and he said the key word in AA is effectiveness. And, am I being effective? And he was the king of corrections work,
Yeah.
and he taught me a lot. And he said, in your work, when you go into prison and stuff, you keep asking yourself, is this an effective thing I'm doing? And if not, then adjust it and do something more effective,
Yeah.
But I think it's effective in every part of our lives,
Nice.
What it brought up for me when Justin was talking was like, I had a problem, and still can have a problem with, talking about people. What do you call that?
Gossip.
Gossip.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. And Ivester leaned really hard on it about gossip. But anyway, so, before I had some years in the program and heard from people like Tom Ivester, I thought, well, it's not gossip. That's no big. I'm not like murdering somebody, character assassination, and all that. That's not that. It's just, we're just telling stories. You got to have conversation, right? And the litmus test that he put out was, if the person's not there in front of you, and why would you talk about them, other than to build them up? But why would you do anything other than build them up? What's your motive in doing that? And I'll tell you, I've gotten to the point where I want to tell a story. I want to, denigrate someone, and I wouldn't admit that, but that's the truth. I really want to put somebody down. And so I want to tell a story about them to someone else. And that better voice says, really? Like, why would you do that? Who's that going to help? And then the ego goes, oh, bullshit. Just go ahead and tell it.
Yeah.
And there's this fight going on, and more times than not these days, I go, I don't continue with it. I don't, do the gossip. I don't do it. And it feels like a sting. It feels like I lost something, because the ego's going,
Yeah.
like that. But it's like you get better, as you keep doing this. It's said a design for living that works, and it really is. It really does work,
Yeah.
And, I go off on a tangent, but like, if we continue to do this and more people do this, we're going to save the world doing this. It's the only thing that will,
Yeah.
And Bill Wilson knew that. He knew that in his story. He said, my friend's simple talk around her kitchen table has expanded in a circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men.
Yeah.
And so he saw that it was a really important thing, if people act with integrity,
Absolutely.
And I don't know, there's a bunch of things I could say, but anyway, that's enough on that.
Something you just said made me think of character when we were talking about, taking on a commitment, right? I heard someone once say, and it's always stuck with me, but character building, they said the act of carrying out a resolution long after the excitement of the moment has passed. It's like, that's always stuck
that's
with me.
great.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Justin,
Doing
talk
it
to
when
us.
nobody's looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to us, buddy.
Justin.
Yeah, Justin, go ahead, buddy.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah, no, I was just thinking about too, like, Paul or Tom, what he was saying is just like I hold the belief, and how I read my book is that, what the big book is asking us and what we have, the ability to do is we're going to become sponsors, and it's just like I think that that's, what, the real work is in getting to a place. Like I absolutely agree is that um, a part of that function is that we're going to go out and we're going to do this. We're going to sponsor people. We're going to walk them through the work because my experience over the past few years is just I was just fascinated, and but at the same time is that like with the responsibility part was that something really hit me one day, and it was because I'm a seeker. So what I did was I called Tom, and I told Tom I had some problems going on and everything, and he gave me a suggestion, and what I did is that and I really meant it, and I needed it. So I called on the power. I got in prayer. He asked me, he said, get in prayer, and then I want you to read the family afterward. And I did. And immediately it's just like these things, these new ideas, like it was just like the knowledge wasn't there before. But then something hit me was that like there was one line in there and it says spiritual intoxication. And, it's just that I just immediately thought of that. It was just because like I've got to be mindful, of like who I am, as well as too, it's just that like I thought for years it was all about like, doing the step work, it was about technique and seeking and, like I wanted to know who Don Pritz was and, who Ivester was and, just all of them, Jerry Jones. I mean, like anybody, just all, how did this stuff come to us? And I wanted to know, like, how did Mark Houston do all this? So I was so wrapped up in technique. And why I say that is because that, like, what the 10th step had taught me with what we're talking about is that I can become even spiritually intoxicated to the point where am I upholding, or having a principled life, like in my home,
Yeah.
or at work, or or with the person, that I'm trying to do the work with. Um, because there's something I read the other day is that the ego wants to possess, like the false self, the actor, just the little guy who's just trying to, run the show and just, and that's who I was. I was this guy that just, I mean, there's good parts about it, but the bad part is that I couldn't see the forest for the trees, it's just that I was just too caught up on, it's just like, of mastering the work rather than giving it away, rather like, and then, so that's where I came, to the understanding too, is like what Tom was saying. This is for somebody else, man. It's just, and I'm glad to have finally come to an understanding of that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, seeking or working and the steps or any of that stuff. I mean, that's what it's there for. But don't get lost in it. And it's just because I have to do things in a way because it's like I have a family, and I've had to learn that in my relationship with my wife, who she's the love of my life, love of my life. We have two beautiful kids together, but I can't be like wrapped up in like all this stuff when I'm supposed to be the person that I believe that I feel like God's called me to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was something that was revealed to me, like taking that suggestion, it's just, and I think that's where it's like that's 10th step. It came in that phone call when I called Tom was because, the only thing I could have done better was to go to the throne before the phone. I could have asked God, but I just didn't have it in me. And I'm like, like Tom, I'm drowning. I don't know what to do. So then, but it came, the other directions, it was there. I was ate up. I had, all this stuff going on with self and, but it did happen.
Well, there, what this reminds me of, and I remember that conversation. And in the 12th step, it says we tried to carry this message to alcoholics. And then it goes on and says, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And I always thought, that doesn't even fit with the work we do with alcoholics. Come on. Like, he must have thought, well, they should behave themselves. So I don't want a 13th step. So I'm going to throw this on the end of the 12th step. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what I had figured out.
Yeah.
But what I got later was, Mary Thayer used to hammer us with page 19. And it said, elimination of our drinking is but a beginning.
Yeah.
A much more important, and listen to the language of it, a much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs, right?
Yeah.
That demonstration of living a principled life, living a spiritual life is more important than me not drinking.
Yeah.
That's just the platform. That's just the foundation that a recovery is built on. Okay.
Yeah.
And I thought about this, and I thought, why is that so important to practice these principles in all our affairs? Well, one of the reasons is if, John Pritch used to say the whole world is watching us, and if we act like assholes out in public, at the grocery store or on the highway or in our homes, especially, who wants that way of life?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So part of my 12th step is that I behave myself, that I live a principled life, that I do the right thing, or I try to, and no one does it perfectly, And the other thing with that, just to not miss this, the thing about, because we're going to read love and tolerance of others is the code of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Love and tolerance of others is the code of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so practicing that tolerance, the only way I can do that is to see the human being as a child of God, to see the spirit within them. Because, man, there's some bad actors, really bad actors,
Yeah.
And it's like, and so if I'm to tolerate them, and love them also, like the two together, then, I have to see them as a child of God. There was Mary Thayer was influenced by a man named Bill Musser, who was from Minnesota. Bob B. knew him real well. And everybody in Minneapolis and St. Paul knew this guy, Bill Musser. And he was a snowbird. He was out in California when Mary Thayer got sober. And he spent a lot of time with Mary Thayer, like just because he was dying of cancer, and giving her, all of his wisdom, everything he could. And they became good friends, and they'd have coffee a lot. But the thing that she told me that always stuck with me, he said, I love you because of your character defects, not in spite of them.
Amen. Yeah.
Which means I love you because of your humanness, not because of some perfect ideal that you're living up to.
Yeah.
But I love you because you're a human being, just like I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your foibles, make you more human, and ergo make you more lovable.
Yeah.
And I think that's wonderful. I think that's a wonderful thing to aspire to.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I agree with that completely. I'll tell you what keeps coming to mind during this whole conversation is how, like, every time you go through the steps, how this awakened spirit and you start to be more mindful and more of this stuff shows up, and you just get this more like this. Again, it's that intuitive thought or action, right? It's like, it just starts becoming almost second nature as long as we're doing a lot of this, these disciplines on a regular basis. And, so Tom, let's touch on. I don't know when y'all need to be finished. We're 50 minutes in. Y'all good?
I'm retired.
Okay, Justin, you need to be done anytime soon.
No, just whenever you guys want to be.
Okay, cool.
I'm good.
All right, cool. So let's Tom, let's talk a little bit about so. We've gone through the steps. We handful, over and over again. We start getting this this intuitive thought, or this sense of this God conscious. We start seeing there's something inside of us that we're embodying that's we have a good understanding on what we're supposed to be doing, what our role is here on earth, right? And And then, you know, we have this awakened spirit. And then from here, it's like I'm awake and I'm aware, and then I'm carrying this awakened spirit through the day. So let's touch on that watch process.
Yeah, let's definitely touch on that. So, well, let me read it, okay?
Okay.
We're going to, next function, to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. So what this is saying is that this is a way of life. This is part of the design for living that we're going to be trying to live, you know, and it'll be over when they throw dirt in our face, you know. It's not like you're going to arrive someplace. It's you're just going to live and breathe this. That's the way it is. And before I get into that, you know, Pritz said to me one time, Tom, he said, I've taken the numbers off the steps.
Nice. Yeah.
And I thought, well, I haven't.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, good for you. You've got a lot more time than I've got. But I get what he meant now, because, you know, we've been trying to talk about 10 and 11. We've been dovetailing into 3 and into 12. Yeah. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's one big process.
Right, because they fit together as a whole. They really do.
Yeah.
And it's hard to separate them out. If you really, you know, if you know them and you're talking about them, it's hard to separate them out. But anyway, so here's what it says to do. Continue to watch for what? For selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. That pretty much covers everything, you know.
Yeah.
I guess anxiety could be added in there. You know, disappointment. I mean, there's different things, but fear, resentment, dishonesty, and selfishness basically cover all of that. So, and then it goes on to say, when these crop up, not if they crop up. In the human condition, they must crop up, because we're human beings. There's an animal part to us. You know, you scare an animal enough, and they either run for the hills or they run at you. You know, it's fight or flight, and that's just in the DNA of the animal. You know, and so we are animal. We're human animals, and these things are going to come up. But the key word was watch for selfishness, dishonesty. If I'm watching, and they come up, and I notice them, I see them, I can you know, tag them. Then what that means is I've got an observer self that sits outside of my fear-based mind.
Amen.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It does today.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, that is that some people say that's your soul, or that's your higher self, or whatever you want to call it, right? True self. You know, Richard Rohr calls it the true self. But whatever that is, it's a lot better than my fear-based ego mind. Yeah. And if I can see it, then I'm way ahead of it, okay? But the problem is that it often comes up on me, and I start listening to it instead of watching it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When I'm listening, I'm no longer in an observer place. I'm in a subjective place where I'm believing it, or at least parts of it, you know?
Yeah.
And if I practice this enough, I can go, oh man, there you were caught again, you know.
Yeah.
Get out of that, go to God right away, you know. So that's what it says. It says, you know, when these crop up, let's see. We ask God at once to remove them. So that's the first thing. If I'm watching, I go, oh, here it comes again, man. I'm starting to clench up, you know, I'm starting to get anxious about something, you know, and you know, God, please remove this. Please remove this, you know. And even if I don't fully mean it, it's still a really good action that helps the process a lot, right?
Yes.
So God, please remove this, right? And then discuss them with someone immediately. I always talk about this, that I'm not sure how Bill and Bob pulled this off. Like, talk to someone immediately. And I'm not sure you need to talk to someone immediately every time about every little thing that tweaks you.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to, you know, we have no excuse because we have cell phones. You know, we can have 5 or 10, you know, 10-step buddies that we trust, you know, closed mouth friends, and we can call them in a heartbeat. And if you call 4 or 5, you're going to get somebody, right?
Yeah.
So Bill and Bob, maybe they talked to the cab driver. I don't know what the hell they did to be able to, just talk to someone immediately.
Yeah.
But I think, immediately was a goal with them.
Yeah.
It might have been later that night, or it might have been the next day. But the goal was immediately,
Yeah.
And make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. And often the way I know if I've harmed someone is I get the objectivity of the person that I'm talking to. I talk about this a lot, that I sponsor a lot of guys, and I have for a lot of years. And Justin's absolutely right. What we're here to do is sponsor. That is the 12th step. No matter what anybody says, that's the 12th step. Everyone in AA should sponsor. And if it's hard to do, all the better. It's like, so anyway.
Yeah.
But these guys call me and they'll go, Tomas, I don't really think I owe amends on this. What do you think? And of course they know they owe amends, or they wouldn't even call on it. You know what I'm saying? And it's the funniest thing in AA. It's like,
that's awesome.
And I could throw it back at them. I don't know. What do you think? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
We can play ping pong with it a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, discuss them with someone immediately. Make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. There's an old saying that about eating crow. It's best served warm.
Yeah.
Ever heard that?
Yeah.
When it gets cold, man, it's a nasty dish.
So true. So true. Yeah.
So anyway, make amends, quickly if we have harmed anyone. And then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. And I always say this, it doesn't say, now you need to run out and find the Little Sisters of the Poor and volunteer. That's not what it says.
Yeah.
It says, turn your attention to someone else. Turn it off you and onto someone else.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And just that little piece, gets you out of self to whatever degree. And what happens with me a lot is I'll think about somebody and I'll think, man, I haven't talked to them. They called me a couple times like this last month and I never called back. And I think they were hurting and they could use a call,
Yeah.
Or just like you said, the intuitive pops up, which by now that's starting to happen all the time.
Yeah.
Because we always had the intuitive. We always had the sixth sense, but it was masked by all the crap that needed removing through the step process. I think every human has had intuitive thoughts that were the right thought, but they don't come that often because you're covering them up with fear, with resentment, etc. And once you start to remove that, then the intuitive gets better,
Amen.
And so, it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of so-and-so, but I know they need help. And you call up that person, they go, my God, you couldn't have called at a better time.
Yeah.
I really needed someone, and thank God that you did that. And all of that comes together in this, absolutely it does. Love and tolerance of others is our code. And I think one of the things we ought to tell newcomers when they get here is like, if you're going to play this game, if you're going to be in this with us, we don't have any rules except Rule 62, right?
Yeah.
We have traditions, but nobody can enforce them.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You can break every tradition there is, and nobody will kick you out of AA.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no rules. The traditions aren't laws, but we do have a code here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's love and tolerance of others. And if you're going to be with us, you might think about applying that to your life.
Wow.
At least remembering. I say this almost every time I speak. I talk about love and tolerance of others. Anyway,
Nice.
how's that for watching?
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Justin?
Yeah, I mean, just where I've came at it, like on this journey, is just that there's I would say that, the way that I see it is that we are placed, on a much higher plane, in our internal life. It's an inner life. And most of the time I can sense things, and I've gotten some of that because I use, the principles and the steps, but I also use meditation. And meditation is just something that is just, to me, it does not have to be like all these other things. It doesn't have to be complicated. But I come to know who I am, and I know how I be. I mean, my sponsors told me, that Alcoholics Anonymous is all about be. But usually when these things crop up today, and what it's done, over the course of, these past few years is that when manifestations of self were just these few things that we're talking about right here in this paragraph, is that it's like a reaction. It's like the instincts are misguided and misfiring, and I don't know what to do with them. But most of the time it's just that when I'm afraid, and a lot of this stuff for me is all fear based. It's false. But it's this reaction. And I can feel it, most of the time today is just, and that's just what I've gotten out of meditation, as well as just, this watching. It's not all mental, I can feel anger in my body, and I can feel fear, so it's just different tools that we have to work with. But it's just that immediately, it's just that I think that we're able to put these things that we're talking about into practice. And one of the things that, my sponsor, Jack, when he first took me on as a sponsee, he asked me, and he said that I want you to get a few men, and I want you to 10th step with them and come into a relationship with them. And so that's what I do.
Nice.
And it's just become a practice, is that I've got these men in my life that I can take this. And I think I heard it one time. It's I'll remember and I'll let you know, but it's just, there's a guy that said, sharing 5th steps levels the playing field. And I took that into like my 10th step work, is that when I'm, using it, and I'm not holding anything back, because I know that there's people that I can call, not just my sponsor, but there's other guys that, that sometimes it's just that I can relate with as well. And the first thing though is that, when you got a good 10 step buddy, is that he won't let you run with the narrative. So that's just been my experience. And it's just that as soon as, it's like you've got a good guy that, you're working with and you're sharing these things with, it's just that, they're not going to let you rant and like, go on and just tell them all about, so and so, or it's just like, okay, causes and conditions, let's pray about it,
Yeah.
And but no, I mean, what Tom was talking about too is just that's one of the it's one of my favorite spiritual realities. I mean, I that's the best way I can put it, but it's one of the most least things I've ever heard talked about in Alcoholics Anonymous. I even tried this one time. I was just playing speaker tapes, and I was like, all right, let's see if they talk about it. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about the vital 6 sense. Maybe it's just something that, I don't know, but to me it's pretty important. Is because it's talking about this awareness.
Yeah.
So that's something that it's become a part of me. And I think that puts me on a much higher plane, is that I have developed this 6th sense. And I can, definitely start and begin to watch. But as well as it doesn't just also allow me to watch, is that I can also become conscious of God.
Nice. Yeah. Nice, man. Good stuff. I'll tell you, I'm going a little bit further in the 10th step. So, there's this part where, right there where it says, each day is the day where we must carry the vision of God's will in all our activities, right? How can I best serve thee? Thy will be done, not mine, right? Or thy will, not mine, be done. It says these thoughts which must go with us constantly, right? We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. This is the proper use of the will, right? And so a buddy of mine, and this will kind of lead us into 11 really. People talk quite a bit about, people talk quite a bit about the prayer meditation side of things, but they don't really, there's a lot of people miss the whole vision, and my buddy, Dave talked to me over this last year. He says it's prayer, meditation, and vision, prayer, meditation, and vision, prayer, meditation, and vision, right? So, And if you look over and how he starts this whole thing, he has a thing called the 12 daily prayers. And the first one says, if you look over on page 83, it says, so we clean house with the family, asking each morning that are in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love, right? So it's a prayer. So, he says, we're going to ask each morning that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. And then he says, now we're going to meditate, to thoughtfully ponder, right, on what those principles look like to us. It's talking specifically about the family, so we can just use the family as an example. So what would it look like? My wife's Lisa. What would it look like to be patient towards Lisa? In the situations that may have come up in the past. What would it look like to carry this vision through the day? Tolerant. What would it look like to be tolerant towards her? Loving and kind. Not always having to be right. Being more understanding. Less understood, and meditating on these principles, and then carrying that vision as we're going through the day. And if you look what Bill's constantly, he's talking about. There's a whole chapter called "A Vision for You," right? He talks about this. If you look in going into the 11th step, right, it says we review our plans for the day, right? That's some kind of vision, right? If you also look at, I love how whenever, and one thing I touched on, that what y'all touched on earlier, that I love Bill, what he did in his writing, was a lot of times he would, whenever he's going to give you some kind of like big truth about yourself, like for example, the nightly review, for example, right? At the end of it, at the beginning of it, we constructively review our conduct, and then at the end of it, it says, "Be careful not to drift into war." Morbid reflection. I forgot the exact words, but I love how he says it would diminish our usefulness to others. Right? He's constantly bringing us back to like what our focus is, what we're doing this for, what we're doing this for, what we're doing this for. Which is, how can we be more productive in our society? How can we be more productive in this life, carrying this vision of God's will through each day? And what are we really here for, and what's blocking that from taking place, right? So I love like the prayer, meditation, and vision aspect of this thing. I think we should maybe carry that into what it looks like, kind of dovetail that into step 11. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. They both fit together.
Yeah.
They absolutely do. So what I was always taught was that it's my vision of God's will for me.
Oh.
And, I really, it just gets simpler and simpler. Like, treat God's kids, like you want to be treated, and help them, in any way you can, and that's basically it. Like my vision, like here's the deal. This will go down a bunny trail for you. A lot of years, my vision in the morning that I was setting as I went out was, I want to manifest loving kindness in everything I do.
Nice.
And I would say that prayer, and then my ego would start screaming, "You can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't. They'll eat you up. They're gonna, tear you apart if you go into life like that."
Yeah.
And that's absurd. It's not true.
Yeah.
It's an ego lie. It's what it is. There's a story that Big Frank McKibben gave a prayer to this friend of ours, JP. He's a businessman in Vietnam. He's an English guy, but his family's lived in Vietnam for generations now. And Big Frank gave him this prayer, and it goes, "God, please grant me the power to face what I need to face with an undefended heart."
Wow.
And that's exactly the prayer, in different words that I was trying to say. Like, let me go out in the world and manifest the way of love and kindness,
Yeah.
And so, the only part of me that wants me to defend my heart is the ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the only part.
Yeah.
So if I continually, work at that vision, here's another thing. I wanted to put this out. Bill didn't know half of what he was writing. I mean, he really didn't have a grasp on it. Like, he started doing transcendental meditation 2 years before he died.
Yeah.
And somebody said to him, well, Bill, what kind of meditation do you do? And he goes, well, I don't do meditation.
Yeah.
They said, what are you talking about? You wrote that in the big book. He goes, well, I know I wrote it, but, I'm not just thinking about spiritual things,
Yeah.
I mean, he seriously, he did not know what he was writing, which is why a lot of us think it was divinely inspired at the very least, or divinely created, So, meditation takes on all forms. I mean, I've done tons of things in the last almost 40 years with meditation. And anymore, I just try to stay present, I try to sit in the, there was Thomas Keating. He said, God's first language was silence. All else is a poor translation.
Mm.
And it's I think it's exactly what Justin was saying. It's like if I sit there, the realization comes about that, I mean, really, this is giving away the whole bag of popcorn, but the real truth, and it's in our book, and it's what Jesus was saying, is I am God. I am God. I'm not the God, but I am God the way the wave is ocean. Yeah. The wave is not the ocean, but the wave is nothing but ocean.
Yeah.
And, Jesus in the Bible, it says, be still and know I am God. Not that I am God. Be still and know I am God. That was the original translation. And so the instruction was, get still, go into the silence and realize what you are, that you're nothing less than that. You're a child of God, which means you are God,
Yeah.
and that realization, in the big book, it says we found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it was only there it could be found. You know what I mean? That's what we're shooting towards.
Yeah.
And once you realize that, then you see it in everyone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then, who was it? I think you do know. Oh God, who am I thinking of? My buddy, Mike.
I don't know. I don't.
I thought you did. I thought you interviewed him.
No.
Yeah.
No.
He said this thing recently. He said, I don't meditate and I don't pray. He said, what I do is I realize with every breath that I'm walking on holy ground.
Wow. Nice.
That all of it is sacred. Yeah. And he's been a pipe carrier and done Sweat Lodge for years and years.
Sounds like I need to interview him.
Yeah, I think you should.
Yeah.
I think you should. Chris sponsored him also.
Nice.
And I didn't mean to break his anonymity, but I'm an idiot anymore. I'll blame it on the chemo. But anyway, that's what he said, and I started thinking about it. And I thought, what? You don't meditate? What?
Yeah.
And because I still do, but I would like to aspire to what he's saying.
Yeah.
Is that every step I take, I realize I'm walking on sacred ground, and every breath that I take in, I realize is God coming into me. Mm. And it already was in me, but it's coming in again.
Yeah.
And every bird I see, and every part of creation is what Jesus was saying. He said now I'm really on a roll here, but he said to the disciples, he said, you're walking in heaven, and they go, what? Like we're in heaven? No, it doesn't look like heaven. Not what heaven's supposed to be. It looks pretty grim out here. And he said, well, that's because you're looking at it wrong. Mm. Like, don't you remember I said to you, to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must be as a little child. And they said, yeah, but what do you mean by that? And he said, well, a little child. They don't judge everything. They don't, this is good and this is bad.
Yeah.
And that's a bad person. That's a good person. They're just in awe of every bit of it. And so they're in heaven.
Yeah.
It's like, and if you would adapt that attitude, then you'd realize, you are in heaven, but you don't understand it. You don't realize it. But if you'd adopt that attitude, you would realize, you'd wake up to the fact that you're in heaven. that every step is sacred, that everything you do is a part of it, you know.
Yeah.
Was that too far out there?
No. I love it. Yeah. You know, I get out there.
Oh man. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Talk to us, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, especially it's just that something else, I learned, just by, keep doing this, man. It's just that um it's just the principle in asking, it's just and that's just a very specific direction that I completely miss. But it's for me it's just that like just in the 11th step, on that page in 86, it's just that it asks there's 8 times it specifically asks us to do this. But who are we doing it with? And it's God. It's all about God. And it's just that. So that's where it's just like too. That's why I kind of it brought it up in me was about the third step earlier, and then here we are at doing the spiritual piece of business right here. Is just because it's that how am I engaging in the power today? That's all I have to worry about. And, it's just, and when I'm doing these things that we're talking about and stuff, it's just that, like, absolutely, man, I am engaging and having a working relationship with the power.
Yeah.
And that's something like I honestly, like, if I miss a day, I'll sometimes, just because I get exhausted. So, like, I'll skip, but if I skip in the morning, I'm making up for it on my lunchtime or whenever I can. I'll make the time, because if I don't make the time for prayer and meditation in my life, I get sick. It's just it's so subtle, like what this thing does to us, and it's just that for me, it's just that like I can't go without it. It's just and with the meditation, like Paul and I are like, man, if there's something that like I think is interesting, I know I can just send it to Paul. Like, we'll go back and forth and stuff. Like we both, and I love other religions, and he's like the only person I can ever share anything about Tibetan Buddhism with.
Yeah.
I mean, like he showed me like some stuff too. Like as we were getting sober, he'd be like, "Dude, this is so cool," and I'd be like, "It is. I got to know more about that." And so, but. Yeah, I mean, we were just, I sent you something the other day, and we were just talking about love meditation, man. And it's just that's something that, sometimes my meditations look like that. Sometimes my meditations are very easily like, I read spiritual literature and I think very deeply on what I'm reading, and I want to envision that stuff like, like as in it's kind of like an ideal relation, like with me and God and the other person or the situation. But sometimes it's like, if I'm not just going to the breath, just, very basic meditations, I want to send as much love out as I can. Even if I don't have it at that moment, that's what, what I aspire, to have. Like, I wish I could just not be selfish. I wish I could be loving, kind, all the time towards all. And so I'm not trying to make it till fake it till I make it, but that's what I feel like is a possibility. And even if I don't have it, I mean, still practice, still get in there and play around with it, and there's all kinds of stuff out there, it's just however people want to meditate, but, sending love out to people. And then, a practice I do today is I pray for people, and not because I think you need it, because my ego tells me that you need it. That's why I'm praying for you. And that's not, productive, but I'm just saying it's just, going towards a more loving and tolerant view of others is that I don't know what you're going through, like, the steps and the principles have given me where it's like, I can be in that position of neutrality, and instead of, being offended, I can try to be understanding and place myself in your shoes. Or what's going on, I think sometimes, I don't know what's going on in somebody's inner life, and I pray for that. I pray that, maybe that I could know that, or at least, that person, could have that chance, to, find some peace or whatever. I don't know what they need, but it's just that I feel that, that's just something that I've come to become aware of, is that I don't know what else someone's thinking, and I don't know what they're going through, you know?
Yeah.
And I try to think of that, like, before, my reaction is to be offended, but then I've just started, prayer, lists. And I honestly, I don't use it all the time, but I carry at work sometimes, I'll have it I have it in my backpack, or I'll carry it on the side. And something that I got into not too long ago is that I write prayers, just for people, but not just others, but I write specific prayers for my wife and my children. And I think that that's the most thoughtful thing that I can do, no matter, how late I'm working, or, what I'm doing, is that if we're not on a phone call or texting, that I'm always carrying that, like, I'm thinking about them, and I always pray for their well-being, and, their health, and, their protection and everything. And, but I think, I really like that. The vision, is because it really, to me, is just, if I can look at it like in those ways, is that, like, it's like God and I are, we're connected, we're in union, and we're working on something together. And I may not know what I need, or I may not know what to do, but if we're working together on something, if I can have faith and trust in it, then it's all going to be okay. Because one thing that, my sponsor told me, and it didn't come into effect, and I want to tell you guys a little story, and then we can move on, but he told me several times, and I couldn't get it. It's just too simple. And he was just asking me to have faith. And he said, God's got the whole thing. And then, so earlier this year, March 27th, my mother passed away. And she passed away because she was a longtime user of, all kinds of substances. But she passed away was because she had heart failure due to crystal meth addiction.
Oh, man.
And so, and we've been estranged for years. The only last bit of contact I had with her is that she asked for help. I brought her up to Lebanon, Tennessee. I got her into a halfway house, and she worked a program. She completed an IOP program. She was sober for 60 days. And then I never seen her until she was placed in my care, and she arrived, with this going on. And so for weeks, my wife and I dealt with, she was in one hospital, and then she was on my couch, and then we had to get her back in another hospital, and I had no idea what to do. And then luckily she was finally accepted into a nursing home. But this was just one of the most recent experiences where I was disconnected from God. I was just so ate up. I was sick. I didn't know what to do. And then it came the time where they told me that she's not going to live much longer. You're going to have to let hospitals take care of this. And I told them flat out, I was like, no, I'm not going for it. I don't want to do it. You're not going to do that. And then I called my sponsor, and I told him what was going on. And I said, there's no way in hell. I was like, they're not going to do this. And he said, I want you to step out of the way, and I want you to trust them. And I just started crying, and I started bawling my eyes out. And I said to him, I was just like, I can't do that. And he's just like, well, I want you to do this and just trust them. And then he told me that God chose me. And he said that God chose you to take this responsibility. He placed her in your care. Now for you to get out of the way and let hospice do their thing. And begrudgingly, I did that, But while this was happening, and I said yes, but then I started asking. And I just really got into prayer as like I never did, man. And it's just like, and what God gave me out of that was that even through the worst times, is that I had grace. And what the coolest thing was too is just like, I'm really grateful for the wife that I had, was that I was at work, and my mother was about to take her last breath, and Lauren was there with her, and she held her hand until the last breath. And this vision that I have out of that, like coming back to like the 11th step and the asking and all of this was because the love that she was shown till the end, but then too is just that there was a lot of forgiveness. And I didn't have that in me prior up to leading to that because I was ate up with a lot of things, and this all just hit me all of a sudden just to have responsibility over and take care of. But the perception changed, and I called Jack back, and I was just like, I told him that my mother passed, but I said, you were right. God chose me. And it's just, that's something that's just that, like, I believe when we put these things to practice, whether we're doing it productive, in a good way, but even when, the shit hits the fan and you don't know what to do, it's just keep asking, and, I just too, it's just that's something like with the vision thing was just that, like, I hope that the life that we get to live today and the challenges that we get to walk through is to give someone else that piece of grace that we have.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow. It's man, I'm just sitting here thinking about like that. That's a powerful story. I'm sitting here thinking like the guy that, I remember when you come in, or, the guy that you come in as, imagine if when you first come into recovery, stories like that would just be like, it's terrifying, right? It's like we would run for the hills. It makes me think of this whole vital sixth sense and this intuitive thought and this awakened spirit and just what happens through the recovery process, right? It's like, man, this is a byproduct of, waking up and, rightly relating ourselves to this power, right? And just the miracles that happen, it's unbelievable.
I think, I mean, one of the great gifts that I have is that I've been here a long time, and I've gone through a lot of different experiences and stuff, and so my base, people say, well, how do you keep conscious contact? How do you maintain that or whatever? And what I've got is this experiential thing, that Mary Thayer talked about, that Kathy Heekin talked about, just tons and tons of evidence, that something's been helping me and trying to help me all this time. And so even when I get freaked out, I get scared, I get tweaking about something, there's a baseline where, oh, ye of little faith, like, when have I ever let you down? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like the background music of my life, is that. And that's incredible. I mean, it's an incredible thing. I guess, if I get dementia someday or something, I'll lose contact with that, but maybe I won't, who knows? And, but the bottom line is I have faith that something is trying to bring me to my highest good, whatever that is, without having to put a name on it.
Yeah.
And it's, it's an unsuspected inner resource that, I finally realized, I never had any inkling that it was there, but I mean, seriously,
Same here. Yeah.
Drinking whiskey, shooting dope, man. I didn't think, I thought, if there's a God, man, he's condemned me to hell.
Amen. Yeah.
And and I deserve it, that kind of thing. But what I, with the years as they've gone by and the things I've gone through, I'll tell this story kind of quickly. My mind just jumps all over the place. But there's a woman named Elaine H., and she's in Fort Collins, Colorado. She's an English teacher, and a brilliant woman, and a really, really spiritual woman. I just love her. And she told the story. She spoke at Fellowship of the Spirit one year, and she told the story, and she said, my first sponsor said, Elaine, I want you to keep a journal. And she said, oh, that's no problem. I'm an English major. I journal all the time. She goes, no, listen, this is a special journal, and I want you to title it Evidence.
Nice.
And when these God shots happen, you might have heard me tell this at one point.
Kat
When
shared
these
this the other
God,
day too.
who did?
Kat, you had her do the same thing. She shared it with us the other day. Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Kat. Yeah. I know. She's great.
Yeah.
And when these happen, write down these God shots, these like supernatural things, or these coincidental things, or synchronistic things, call them whatever you want.
Yeah.
But things that are just beyond, what you would imagine could possibly happen, that just in the natural world, and write them down in there. And so Elaine said, well, why should I do that? She goes, because there'll come the day when you'll go, God, who?
Yeah.
Yeah. There will be no belief, there'll be no faith, and you'll open that up and you'll read those things and you'll go, oh yeah. Yeah. And it may not instantly bring you back into total faith, but it will help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so I don't even remember all the things. Like, I've tried to write them down. There's just way too many, to even remember, but they're in there someplace. And what that does is it gives me what Alan Watts said, faith is not knowing and having that be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's perfect.
Amen.
That there's that undercurrent of knowing that something's trying to help you, even if you get tweaked out and go off base, that current is still there. It's still there with you.
Yeah. And
then you remember that, you go, so many times, when I had hepatitis C, I blamed God for it. I was screaming at God, and how could you do this to me? I'm 8 years sober. I've been helping your kids, blah, blah, blah. And the day after that, when I had my meltdown with God, I realized God didn't stick those needles in your arm. Yeah. Who are you yelling at? And I said, oh, forgive me, God. I kind of had a skewed, kind of perception of that,
Yeah.
And then when I got leukemia, and the guy said, basically you're going to die a year ago, he said, not a good prognosis, and I was like, for a while I was like, man, God, I was rocking and rolling, man. I was helping your kids and I was having a good time here, on your playground planet, is what Don used to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really having a great time. And I've never been closer to my wife. We're married 47 years.
Nice.
And I said, why now? Like, why is this happening now? And I was disappointed. I wasn't afraid of dying, but I was disappointed, that I couldn't do certain things that I had planned on doing or that I wanted to do. And, finally I got to a place like resolved with it. And it's like, God, it's been a great run, and anything you want, I'm down for.
Mm.
And if we're going to the other side, I'm curious and I'm all in for it,
Nice.
And if you have more work for me to do, I'll man up and I'll do it. It's your business. And then people were praying for me all over the world, literally all over the world,
Yeah.
And I think that helped. I really do. So anyway, I don't know why I went off on that.
No,
I had a point to it, but
no, like I said, I'll tell you what.
It's getting late. It's getting late.
Yeah. We'll wrap up with this, but what it just reminded me of is, and this has popped up a couple different times, was, some people don't like the words the discipline, but the disciplines of 10 and 11, right? It's like,
right.
It's one of those. I heard a guy once say, the difference between a disciplined person and an undisciplined person. Let's just use basketball for an example, right? If you take someone that's a disciplined basketball player, they can take the ball and with 3 seconds left on the clock, do anything they need to do to make whatever happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing, like, through these disciplines, there's situations where, first off, it's rightly relating ourselves to the power. It's not like we're doing anything, but we're relating ourselves to this power, right? But if you take what these disciplines are, there's been periods in my recovery where, like, I'd go through bouts of depression here and there, or whatever the situation is, whether it was death.
We all do,
right?
By the way, Paul.
And it was like these disciplines carried me through these tough situations. Those days where I remember I heard Don P once say on a talk, he said, I would woke up one day and I felt like God was in Cincinnati. And there's been 2 times in the last, 8 years where that's happened, right? And I remember listening to him say that, and I would just sit there and have a conversation with God. Like, I don't know that you're here. I don't feel you. This is not right. This doesn't feel right. And this is like 2 days into it. You know what I mean? Like the first day, it was kind of like just like a little nut, like an irritability. Second day, it's pretty terrifying. I'm surprised it actually, it took me that long before I actually had a conversation on like, I don't feel you here, where you at, And,
Right.
But yeah, those disciplines, like my feet were still moving. I was still meeting with my guys for step work. I was still doing, the things my feet have been trained to do, and,
Yeah.
and that's part of
We
this
say
whole
that
thing.
all the time. We get smart feet.
Yeah. There you go. I love that. Smart
And we
feet.
keep moving.
Yeah.
There's one thing, that you're talking about the disciplines. There's one thing I really wanted to say and didn't. The ego will use the very best of me against me. I don't know if you've noticed. I'm pretty sure both of you have noticed that in your lives.
Yeah.
It'll come at me, good, bad, or indifferent, and it ain't my amigo, So, and really, and I said this one time at the page 112 meeting. I never had thought this, but somebody had read alcohol is a subtle foe. What we really have is a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of our spiritual condition.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, alcohol is a subtle foe, but the ego is an even more subtle foe.
Yeah.
Because I smell Jack Daniels, but I don't smell the ego.
Yeah.
It's on me.
Yeah.
Even if I'm exercising the watcher and everything, it still can get me before I realize it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it makes sense. Yeah, that is an asshole. I should hate that person. Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so the what I'm leading up to is I made an awful lot of really hard amends, and I talk about it from the podium, right? And I kind of brag about it, or to some degree. I don't anymore, but I used to, and so what I would do is I would be in meetings, and people would be, 9th step meetings, and somebody'd be telling all the reasons they didn't have to make amends. You ever heard of been in a meeting like that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my mind would go, well, those slackers, they're not working a spiritual program. Look at the humiliating, amends that I've made. Look at all the money I paid back, the thousands and thousands that I paid back, and gone to people and said I was wrong to do that. And what can I do to make it right? These people don't do that. They're less than, Yeah. And so a very good spiritual exercise that I have been involved in, namely the 9th step, making my amends, the ego takes that and uses it against me to judge other people. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So Bill C gave me this, and I've learned so much from him. There's certain people that you just hear what they say.
Yeah.
And he's one of my guys. And he said, when you finish all of your amends, like every one of them that you're consciously aware of, right? There's nothing to brag about. You're not on some hilltop. Where you're at is even with the world where you always should have been. You follow?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm cleaning up shit that I shouldn't have done to begin with.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I'm not like some holy roller
Yeah.
that's holier than thou.
Yeah.
It's like now I'm even with the world, and at this point, my work is to grow in effectiveness and understanding in 10, 11, and 12. That's my job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where the real work is.
Yeah.
It's like you clean up your life. That's nothing to brag about. You should have been there anyway. You shouldn't have done that shit.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I that really turned me around. It really let me see that,
Yeah. Good stuff.
I gave a talk on the 10th step at Fellowship of the Spirit in Colorado this last year. And I went into every bit of this that we're talking about, including the bragging about the ninth step. So anyway, let's go ahead.
Before we end, I just thought of something because, like, I love this podcast. I listen to it. I'll catch, any episode that I can. But, if someone new is listening, it's just come in, and try to sit all the way down. And, it's just that. But if something we're talking about resonates with them, it's just that, like, something that I was thinking about with, all of us, I think we have in common, but it's just that we have devoted our lives, into this thing, and it's just that I think that sometimes it's just it's just a natural byproduct. It's like when you're, giving yourself, to this program, it's just like these things can happen. And I wanted to bring this up because it has to do with 10 and 11, mostly 11. But Paul, he shared an inventory with me, and I believe he got it from Jay. And but it said, what do you think about what the most treasure? It's what you treasure about someone, And I was just sitting here thinking about it. It's just like that kind of came back, like I'm sitting here and I'm treasuring, it's like this conversation that we're having, and it's just like I had a question for Paul. It's just since we're talking about it, it's just because one of the things that I do treasure about like Paul's walk and like what I've seen over the years is like, was his sponsorship and the commitments that he has. And I see that we all have that in common, but it's like, what is, that done for you, Paul? It's just like being able to like sponsor the men that you have and, be very helpful to, like in all the areas, your life, treatment, and, because we see those things, man.
Yeah, that's a good question. Appreciate it. I appreciate it. First off, thank you. I'll tell you what all like just all this everything has taught me is how first off how important I needed help. I need help. I couldn't have figured any of this out. Right. I had to have some kind of help outside of me, and in the beginning that was, a human form. Something living through somebody else talking to me. But I tell you what, like the best part about this is I've experienced it. Like I have deep core needs that I never knew I never would have known about. Like, purpose or trust, like having my life having a purpose. That's like a deep core need that I think all of us have. And I've, luckily just through all this, through the process of what the 12 steps and, having a purpose and purpose driven and, being able to work with all these people and all these guys and just everything, commitments and everything that's what it's really taught me was how to, it's just that, it's just like, there's so much I would have never seen had it not been for the love that I've been shown, through all y'all, and
that's absolutely true.
It's just
that's
crazy. It's so full.
The one thing that I meant to mention earlier with the sponsorship thing, and and what it led me to remember is, I sponsor guys in their 20s and in their, and 30-year-olds, and I never see that my oldest grandson is 33. My son will be 55 this month, my oldest. Right. But I don't see them as, kids. I see them as alcoholics. I see them as equals. And there's some of us are further along the track, but the alcohol is not just the great persuader; it's the great equalizer. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because any of us could be drunk, and we are shoulder to shoulder. Yeah. And there is no hierarchy in this thing, except that the ego wants to produce, and that's bullshit anyway. Yeah. But one of the things that Mark Houston talked a lot about was spiritual consent. Okay.
Yeah.
When I think Justin was saying that when you two talk to each other, there's no rules. There's no taboos.
Yeah.
When you're talking to each other, And that's what spiritual consent is. And I give that to my sponsees. And I say, if any bullshit you see in me, call bullshit on me. You know, I'm not just giving you permission. I'm asking you to please do that. And I'm going to do the same with you.
Yeah.
And if we have spiritual consent, then there's no hurt feelings. There's none of that.
Yeah.
We know that it's life and death, and we're doing the best we can for each other.
Amen.
So
yeah.
I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, you being useful is the key. Like I remember Don P used to always talk about that, how important it was. He'd say there's all those old timers that you run into. Oh, you know, like it's so important that, you know, all of us first off, but you know, them too. We have use in our life. We're useful. We have a purpose, right? And that's what that's really what all this has done, was given me, it's helped me. I'm useful to life today. I'm making a contribution.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the whole deal.
Yeah.
You know, I have meaning and purpose in my life, and I was meaningless and purposeless when I got here.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, good stuff, guys. Is there anything either one of y'all want to finish up with?
Well, we need to do another hour and a half to do it justice. You know?
Yeah.
But I mean, we didn't talk about the pause. We didn't talk about, you know, all day long. There's an old thing, old joke that people said, well, in the 11th step, it says you only have to pray 3 times. Once in the morning, once at night, and all day long.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
So we didn't hit all that, but you know,
I say we set some more dates. I think we need to set some more dates and do this. Maybe I think the next. Let's do like a step 1, 2, and 3 and talk for you know. And I'll be in Nashville in 3 weeks. Nice.
Cool. And then I'll be there for 4 months. So
okay, you're going to be here. So you will be here for 4 months after that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys.
Yeah, maybe we could do it in person, all 3 of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, great, guys. Thank you so much. And this has been freaking awesome. I connect with you guys so easy. It's natural. So natural.
Yeah.
And y'all stay on here, and I'm going to close out and just stay on here. We'll be right back. Thanks for all the listeners.
Okay.
We hope everyone enjoyed this. Thank you, guys.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.